Tier list time once again. Already did the SEC, now going on to the Big Ten. We have our 6 tiers, as you can see, lined up. We have, well, let's start from the bottom and work our way up. We have pain. That's 0 to 2 wins. And keep in mind, this is regular season. This isn't conferences. You'll probably be able to figure out pretty quick. Bad is 3 to 4 wins. Average is 5 to 6. Good is 7 to 8. Great is 9 to 10. And 11 to 12 gets you in the college football playoff contenders tier. Because if a Big Ten team goes 11-1 or undefeated, obviously something has gone horribly wrong if they don't put them in. They get, I don't know, the committee gets publicly humiliated even further than they already do. We'll be going on these teams in order of the preseason media poll. So if you're wondering why certain teams are above others that we talk about that way, well, we didn't decide on that list of who goes where. Other people did. So Tyler, are you ready to get back into this? The last time we did this, it was crazy. I had a big statement I wanted to say about Ryan Day and Ohio State. I said that if Ohio State does not win a title with $20 million in NIL put together, whatever you want to call it, Ryan Day is never going to win a national title if he couldn't win one with that team. And you know what he did? He won a national title with that team. So he is off the list of coaches for me to question. Now we get to turn our eye to another certain coach in that same position, because the first team to talk about on the list is Penn State. Penn State
ain't so.
Incredible season last year for Penn State. James Franklin in his 12th year. Already had Andy Kotelnicki last year as an OC. Now you make another amazing coordinator hire in Jim Knowles. We know what Jim Knowles has done, whether it be with Ohio State, whether it be with Oklahoma State, whether it be even with Duke, if you want to go back that far. A 13-3 season last year for the Nittany Lions, 8-1 in the Big Ten, lost to Oregon in the Big Ten title game, went all the way to the semifinals, and lost a tight game to Notre Dame. Penn State brings a lot back. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, that amazing running back duo we talked about so much last year. And Jim Knowles is going to have a lot of fun players to mess around with, see what positions he wants to put them in, see what schemes and craziness he could come up with, whether it be Danny Dennis Sutton on the defensive end, defensive tackle, Zane Durant. I mean, I could just list off as many people as I want to. The linebacker core with Tony Rojas and Dom DeLuca. I could keep listing names, but I think for Penn State, you look at the non-con, laughably easy. Nevada, FIU, Villanova, and then a bye week. Penn State's not 3-0 through that. Things have gone off the rails completely before we even get into conference play. But the real question comes when you play Oregon. That's coming off a bye week. Oregon's a bit weaker than they were last year. I think most people believe in that. They're not going to go undefeated again in the regular season this year. But that is going to be the first game of the test of Drew Aller. If you believe Drew Aller is the guy with all the talent he has around him, last year, Penn State didn't have a great receiving core. They fixed that. The running backs are great. The offensive line will be good. That defense will carry him. Doesn't need to score, drop 45 or 50 to win a game. That's not how Penn State's been for a while. But this is that test. Because you look at the rest of the schedule. Yes, they go to Iowa. Yes, Ohio State, of course, will be big. Indiana's a home game. There really is 2 big tests for Penn State. Oregon at home, Ohio State on the road. That's not discounting Indiana. It's just as a home game, you would believe they would win that. James Franklin does not win games when he is the underdog. When he is the favorite, they are perfectly fine. What is Penn State going to do this year? I think it really all depends on how good you think Drew Aller is as a quarterback. I think he's all right, and I think that might be the problem for Penn State. He's all right. He's not a world beater. He can't go out there and single-handedly win you the game should he need to. He's good. He has his moments where he looks great. He has his moments where he looks okay. And I don't know if that can get Penn State over the hump. So if they can prove me wrong, just like Ohio State and Ryan Day did last year, I will be happy to once again admit that I do not know what I'm talking about. But until that is further proven otherwise, Tyler, I don't know if Penn State can be that team deserving of that number 2 ranking they got in the AP preseason poll.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with you, Kate. On paper, I could completely understand why this team in the AP poll was pushed for number 1. Because they've got guys everywhere, as you laid out. The talent's all there. Now we're back.
Now you're back.
I was
Okay.
able to I was able to hear you that entire time. It was a bit odd. Anyways, uh, so the big questions for me, the two big ones, as I was saying, again, I completely understand why people are pushing for Penn State #1 A people. I get it. I get it on paper. But, and you laid out these questions truly, is Drew Aller really that type of quarterback? Now, I will say for Drew Aller, Cade, he doesn't have to do a lot. He
No, he
just has to
doesn't.
be consistent. He's kind of be like JJ McCarthy was, the good decision maker and work within the system. He doesn't have to go make special plays. He might be required to here and there, but for the most part, he could do his work and just manage the system. The other big question is, has James Franklin truly gotten over the hump in terms of the big game? Some would argue that the playoff run would indicate that. Some would say that's not enough. So what side is he going to take?
I,
Despite those questions, this team absolutely at worst should be 10-2. At worst.
at worst.
I think the best scenario most likely is probably 11-1. That game at Ohio, at Ohio State is going to be tough. But that's it. That's all they've got. So they've got a clear path to 11-1, maybe even 12-0.
I'll disagree with you on the 12-0 part. I think Penn State, in my mind, they're a college football playoff contender. They made the semifinals last year. They have all the talent to do so. My only question with them is not kind of like Ohio State was last year. It's not a question we'll know in the regular season. It's something we'll figure out in the postseason. You laid it out. The talent is all there. Drew Aller doesn't have to do a whole lot. It's just I'm worried about they're going to get to the semis again. They're going to run into someone at equal level to them, and things are going to go south really quick. And they're not going to get blown out or anything, but it's going to be a game where you go, man, if we just had a little bit better quarterback play, this team should be competing for a national title. That's my gripe with where Penn State is at. Now, I could be proven wrong again. I've been proven wrong many times on this channel, but we'll just have to see. And speaking of the defending national champions, they're here as well. Ohio State, 7th year of Ryan Day, 14-2 last year, national champions. Didn't win the Big Ten, didn't even make the Big Ten championship game. Looked like it was the end of the world after losing to Michigan again, but how that quickly changed over the span of a month. And Ohio State brings back not just, a few good players. They bring back a lot. Jeremiah Smith, of course, a wide receiver, the star last year that everyone learned about. Caleb Downs returns at safety. Sonny Styles at linebacker. Carnell Tate will be a great combo piece to Jeremiah Smith in the receiving corps. Get C.J. Donaldson, Jr., transfer running back from West Virginia. But a lot of this is going to come down to, and if you watched our SEC preview video, you heard this a lot. How good is your quarterback? Julian's saying expected to be the starter. I think he is the starter for Ohio State. That's no big shock there. Not a lot of experience. Ohio State came in. They got Will Howard last year. They were able to win a national title that way. They just needed somebody that could lob it down there to Smith or somebody else, really. Lob it to any receiver. Ohio State's always going to have talent down there, it feels like. But the big thing for Ohio State is you start the year at home against Texas. That is your big game right out of the gate. You've got to go to Illinois. You have Penn State to start November. Michigan, of course, looming at the end of the year as well, going back to Ann Arbor. There's a few games for Ohio State where you can see, especially that week one, if they don't come out strong, not that they're necessarily in trouble, but that could be a little bit of a, okay, we're going to see this team figure it out as the year goes on instead of being good from the jump.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule definitely contains a few more pitfalls than what Penn State has. The big question, I think, is will this lack of experience hurt Ohio State? They definitely got plenty of big pieces coming back, like you mentioned, but there are certain spots, quarterback being one of them, where you say, okay, is that inexperience going to play a big factor, right? You'll answer that pretty quickly against Texas. I don't think if they lose that game, that means really a whole lot unless they just get absolutely torched. Then you might worry a little bit. If they keep it close enough, they lose, okay. You might see some growing pains like you're talking about. Still, though, this team's got too much talent. I think at the end of the day, you're looking, yeah, maybe at the worst case, they slip to 9-3 with some of that inexperience, but should be at least 10-2, probably 11-1. I don't know if they could beat, you know, Penn State, Michigan, and Texas, but my guarantee is you probably beat at least 2 of them. So um, things could get a little wonky, but I'm still projecting 10-2, 11-1. So college football playoff likely for them on the borderline between that grade and CFP tier for me.
I think it's one of those Ohio State season. They will, regardless of the Texas game, I think they have the talent and all of that. It'll quickly sort itself out. Illinois will be a challenging game. That'll be kind of your second, okay, where is this team at now type of moment. If they come and just run Illinois off the face of the earth, you feel pretty good about how the rest of the season's going to go. If that's a tight game on the road, you go, okay, I'm glad we're getting this out of the way now, but can we please stop this? But at the end of the day, I think Ohio State, they're right there in that college football contender tier once again. I think an 11-1 season is what Ohio State's going to put up. I think they get the win over Penn State personally. That being a home game kind of feels like a coin flip maybe this year. But Oregon is the next team on the list. The defending Big Ten champion, 13-1 last year. Year 4 for Dan Lanning. It's an Oregon team that only has one offensive starter coming back from last year. Let me say that again. One. This is going to be a completely different looking Oregon team on offense. Dante Moore, it's finally his time at quarterback. Wide receiver Evan Stewart not going to be playing this year. He's already out for the season. But Oregon's got a good running back. They get Mekhi Hughes in from Tulane, one of those big transfer pieces Oregon's happy about. You pair that up with the defense, that it's got some good guys on it, led by Mateo Uiagalelei at linebacker. He is one of those just dominant players that Oregon has seemed to develop over however long you really want to go back, at least since the mid-2000s when they really started to become the Oregon we know today. I'm intrigued at Oregon's schedule because this is not a walk in the park. You've got to go to Penn State. Indiana will be a little bit interesting depending on what your opinion on Indiana is. They've got to go to Kinnick in November. That's never fun. You never want to go to Kinnick in November. It's not a place you want to be. There's weird schedule quirks for Oregon here. You start the year, though, Montana State, Oklahoma State, and Northwestern. You get the Civil War against Oregon State. You have your intrigue there, having a rivalry game right before going up against the number 2 team in the country, more than likely. That might provide some intrigue. It would provide more if it was in Corvallis, but that could be a little entertaining, I guess you could say. But having the bye week right between that and Indiana, I think, helps Oregon a bit there. But it's going to come down to how good Dante Moore comes right out of the gate. You got 4 games that I don't want to say get prepared because you could trip up and something could go wrong. But it's going to be weird to see Oregon have to gel together this quickly.
Yeah, but I think on paper, Kay, the big thing when I look over this team is that truly they're more talented than everybody except Penn State. And that's even with Dante Moore. The question for them is how good is Moore going to be? Got to sit last year, watch Dylan Gabriel go to work. And if he could gleam, that type of greatness, if you will, because Gabriel, we saw him at Oklahoma, he just operates on a different level. Say what you want about the guy. He definitely can make a team better. So how much did he help Dante Moore in that sense, kind of be able to sit back and watch? He will be the question of how far they can go. I think just talent-wise, yeah, you got a couple potential pitfalls, some traps, but this team should be favored in every game except Penn State. They're going to win 10 games.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
So that's where I'm at. They're winning 10 games, and then how far do they go from that point is my bigger question.
Yeah, I guess the way I'd see it is I wouldn't even say split. I think Indiana at home is a win for them coming off a bye week, especially if they do lose to Penn State, which I would think they would. That's a Saturday night in Happy Valley, not a favorable place to play. I think you get that bye week, you could bounce back and beat Indiana. No one else on that schedule, alone really would threaten me if I was an Oregon fan or really concern me a whole lot. It's just, again, some of those weird quirks of the Big Ten, which every conference has their own weird quirks if you really think about it. But Oregon, feels weird saying it again, but another 11-1 team in my book that I like in that college football playoff contender tier. I think Dan Lanning is that guy. If I am no longer on this earth, Dan Lanning loses his strongest soldier. That's all I'm saying, Tyler. I love the guy. I love his coaching style. Stay aggressive. Stay just on top of the game. Keep sending pressure. on offense or defense. People don't talk about sending pressure on offense. Daniel Lanning's one of those guys that absolutely loves to do it. I love what Oregon is continuing to build, even though it's a complete retooling of the offense. I still think that defense is talented enough to win them a few games by themselves,
Now,
Tyler.
I will say this: that means you're staying fourth. The projection essentially either Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon beat each other, or Ohio State beats Texas.
That's true. That is true, Tyler.
That's
I'm going to
that's
let
kind
the
of the
audience figure out which one of those
okay.
I'm picking to happen. Because
Okay.
Ohio State could lose to Michigan for the how manyth year in a row, Tyler. It could
That's
happen.
true. That's true. That's true.
Something weird could go wrong at any time. But the next team we got to get to is Illinois. Illinois is projected as the fourth best team in the Big Ten if we go by the Big Ten's own preseason media poll. And there's a lot to like for Illinois. This is coming off a 10-win season. Brett Bielema doing something that hasn't been done in 23 years for the Illini. 6-3 in Big Ten play. Luke Altmaier back at quarterback. You've got a decent O-line. J.C. Davis will be a part of that. He'll help out. Aiden Lafferty will be the running back this year for the Illini. This is one of those Illinois teams that we talked about it a lot last year. They don't make many mistakes. They can win those close games. They have some of that. It felt like luck on their side at times. The amount of one-possession games they were able to get in, not control of, but able to pull away from at the end, I guess, for lack of a better term. This is going to be an Illinois team. You also have Hudson Clement, transfer from West Virginia, helping out a receiver. Good defensive pieces as well. You got safeties Matthew Bailey, Miles Scott, and Xavier Scott. Illinois' got that defensive talent in there as well to help. Of course, it's not just the offense. Illinois is one of those weird teams this year, Tyler, where you look at their schedule and you say, okay, what about their schedule? Is it really a super tough schedule? And I don't know. I really don't know, Tyler. Duke could be one of those weird teams early on in the year. You've got to go to Indiana. You still have to deal with USC. Ohio State at home will be a big deal. We'll see how they handle going to Washington. Having a bye week, of course, will help before that. You look at that November, though. Rutgers at home, Maryland at home, at Wisconsin, Northwestern at home. That's a pretty good November schedule to have if you're Illinois. There's not really a big stretch. Even USC and Ohio State has a road trip to Purdue in the middle of it. There's not one real brutal piece of this schedule, it looks like.
No, and that's where, I was teasing a little hot take earlier. We get to it right here with Illinois.
Okay.
I think I'm more in love with what Illinois could do than I am what Oregon could do.
Okay.
And why is that? Why is that? Well, Luke Altmaier, right, had his most productive season of his career last year. He can make another leap going into his senior year. Took care of the ball pretty well. On top of that, they've got the running backs. They've got the O-line. That defense is a Big Ten defense. Really, the only question mark is, can someone at receiver step up, right? Kind of fill what they lost in terms of production. Other than that,
oh, it appears we
the
lost.
team is
there
legit.
we go. Now he's
and
back.
The schedule is so good. I mean, anyways, the schedule is so good. You've got two real big games you got to get up for, in my mind. Yes, you got to go on the road against Indiana early to start conference play. But if you get past that, you're going to be favored in every other game except Ohio State, and you host Ohio State. So you have a chance to really pack that stadium and see what you can do. Yeah, you could say Washington may be a little bit of a trap game following, potentially a big game against Ohio State. Sure, I get that. But other than that, I'm not worried about any of those games. I think they've got the poise, they've got the talent, the defense, the coach. I really like what the Illini are putting out. I think at worst, this is a 9-3 team. Really. And I'm not going to put them up there, but I think there is a path to 11 wins for Illinois in the regular season.
Oh, I think there is too. The problem I have with Illinois isn't even really a problem of themselves. It's just, are they going to fall into that classic Big Ten trap of you lose a game you shouldn't at the beginning of the year, and then that changes momentum, things get a little bit wonky, and then you drop another game you shouldn't, and then you play like you're capable of the rest of the year. Because that back half, like you mentioned, after Ohio State, the only game that would semi-concern me is at Washington, and that's just more, does Jed Fish have something weird up his sleeve that we don't know about? Late night magic ensues out in Seattle. It could be one of those type of deals.
West Coast travel
Yeah,
too, so it's a legit concern. I mean, it's not
yeah. That's
out
the
of
only
bounds.
game that I look at and go, okay, that one could be a bit of a threat. That back half you look at should be 5-1 at the worst. It really should. That Ohio State game is your loss, and then you run the table after that. It's just, are they going to trip up at some point before Ohio State? And of USC, Indiana, and Duke on the road, I feel like they shouldn't, but they will find a way to lose one of those games. Just something about this Illinois team. They're going to fight. They're going to get another 10-win season, I think. I like where the Illini are at. I still think Brett Bielema is that guy. I mean, he literally T-posed on Shane Beamer in a bowl game. It was the funniest thing I've seen in all time. I brought this up now in like 3 different videos. It's really funny.
Yes.
It will never not be funny. Illinois, I put them in the great tier. I see the path you're talking about to the playoff contender tier. 10-2 could still be playoffs depending on how the situation
Absolutely.
faces out, you know. But now we've got to get to Michigan. And Michigan is a weird example of what can happen in a college football season. Last year, 8-5. But that includes wins over Alabama and Ohio State. What a weird thing to say. 8-5, but you beat 2 of the best teams in theory, you know, of all time. You beat 2 of the best programs, or you beat the national champion in their building, and then go to a bowl game. And that was just to get to 7-5. And then you go play Alabama in a bowl game, who, keep in mind, still is their starting quarterback and everything. And you find a way to just shut them down for a while and win that game. You cannot think of a better way to build momentum and think, hey, we did this without a quarterback. Imagine what's going to happen when we have one. And they've got one. If you believe the hype on what Bryce Underwood can be, now Mikey Keene could, of course, still come in and be the starter should something happen. But Underwood seems like the guy. You get a transfer running back from Alabama, Justice Haynes, defensive end TJ Guy. You get some linebackers, Ernest Hausman, Deshaun Barnum, defensive end Derek Moore, corner Jair Hill. Michigan's got the defense again. Now, they lose some key pieces, don't get me wrong. But if Bryce Underwood is as good as he can be, if he lives up to that potential early, Michigan can make some noise. They've got to go to Oklahoma. They've got to go to Nebraska. They've got to go to USC. They've got some road games. They've got some big road games. But USC's not as big as a problem as it would have been a few years ago. Nebraska's still trying to get back off the ground. It's year 3 for Matt Rhule. We'll get to them. An Oklahoma team that's going to be in the same position as Michigan. That is your statement win on September 6th. Whoever wins that game, that is one of the biggest, hey, look at me, look at who we beat. That is going to matter in November. It's going to be that type of game for both Michigan and Oklahoma on September 6th. But you look at the rest of Michigan's schedule. Again, you look at that back half. Washington, Purdue, both of those at home, at Michigan State, who's still trying to get back up with Jonathan Smith, Northwestern at Wrigley, Maryland on the road, and then the big one against Ohio State. Kind of the same thing we talked about with Illinois. Michigan with a quarterback, a singular quarterback that can throw the ball and is capable of throwing the ball more than 15 yards down the field, should be a pretty good team this year, I would think.
Look, Michigan for me profiles very similarly to Oregon in the sense that they got talent all over the place. A team that I think is going to be really hungry to prove, hey, what we were at the end of last year was a lot better than the beginning of last year, and you lay that out. The difference, though, Dante Moore, yeah, is he unproven? Sure, but he's got college experience. He sat out last season. He got to learn. Bryce Underwood, as legit as he could be, Cade, he's still 17 right now?
That's true. He's
He
still
doesn't
very
turn 18
young.
until August 19th.
So he's still got a week as of the time we're recording this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's not even going to be hardly 18 by the time the season gets rolling. So as talented as he may be, that's a little scary, right? You want to talk about inexperience. I mean, this guy's going to get thrown into the fire pretty much instantaneously, much that game gets OU. And we talked about in the SEC preview, OU's front seven has the chance to be really special this year. How is Bryce Underwood going to handle that type of environment? I don't care how many stars you got. You cannot be prepared for that. There is no way possible. So that very well could be an early loss, one where, it sucks for Michigan, but they could still rebound from it. And the good news is for them, after that OU game, they had plenty of time, obviously, to get ready for Ohio State. That's the two big games on their schedule. For the most part, it breaks pretty well. Yeah, at Nebraska is not going to be easy to start conference play. On the road against USC could be a problem depending on what USC really is. Other than that, I mean, even if they get blown out by OU, I don't see any reason why this team can't go at least 8-4, and probably I'm looking at more at a 9-3, 10-2 team, unless Bryce Underwood is just absolutely terrible.
And that's where I feel with it. You could split those Ohio State, USC, Nebraska, Oklahoma. You could split that, and you're looking at a 10-2 squad. I mean, those are your four. I don't think that's a bold take to say those are probably your four biggest games of
Absolutely,
the season.
yeah.
You split that, you're 10-2, you're a playoff contender. The schedule lines up for Michigan. It's just, are they going to get off the ground and win those games? But I think they lose at Oklahoma to start the year. I think, like, if that game was in Ann Arbor, I might feel a little bit different if that's a big game for them at home, just a little bit. You have some comfort for Underwood. You don't have the crowd as another factor against you. Nebraska and USC are the interesting ones for me because I feel like they split that. I feel like they win one of those and drop, and I don't know which one it is. That's the weird part. I just feel like they win one of those and lose one of those. That's just a gut feeling type of deal. And then Ohio State, maybe they win that one again. Maybe Underwood gets a lot of experience under his belt by that point. Michigan's got a streak to continue to try to hold on to. You got that feeling of, hey, we beat them as a national champion last year. Who says we can't do it again? Who cares what their record is? That game means more than just about anything to everyone in those two states. We don't care if Ohio State's 11-0. Our job is to make them suffer. Michigan, a team that I kind of feel like I want to say 10-2 with Michigan, but at the same time, that feels too optimistic for Michigan. I still think they're in that great tier. I think their defense will help a lot in terms of that. But if Underwood can just show me something, 9-3 in the great tier seems fine enough for me.
Okay, to answer your question on you don't know which they'll split on Nebraska USC, I know USC's West Coast and that can be tough, but I think Nebraska's a lot more likely to pull off that upset.
I think so too. I think a 2-2 September, and you start to get that. I don't know. Do we know how good Michigan's going to be? And then off to the races they go through October. That would not shock me at all.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit more to get into here because this is where things get weird. Last year, Indiana, we talked about, the great experiment they're kind of pulling off. I mean, we'll watch and see if they can make a bowl game. That might be a great thing for Curt Cignetti to get that program off the ground. They didn't do that. They went to the playoff. I mean, my goodness, just what a turnaround Indiana had. It's now year 2 for the man that wins. You can Google him. 11-2 last year, 8-1 in the Big Ten, made the playoffs, of course, and yeah, they lose some of that talent, but they get Fernando Mendoza in as the quarterback transfer from Cal, and you look at the schedule for Indiana, and what do you see? Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. What a non-con to have. What an easy non-con to stroll through. Illinois, first big game of the season, it's at home. Then you go to Iowa, bye week, go to Oregon. Then you look at that stretch in between there. Michigan State, UCLA, both at home, and then you go to Maryland. Wisconsin and Purdue are your last 2 games of the year. You probably lose Penn State. You probably lose Oregon. Do you think you can beat Illinois and Iowa? If you think you can beat Illinois and Iowa in back-to-back weeks, you're 10-2 and you're in the playoff conversation again. It's that simple for Indiana this year. With what they have on paper, they still have Michael Kamara, the defensive line. They have D'Angelo Pons at corner. They have Aiden Fisher at linebacker. The defense is still going to be there. They get a good running back transfer from UAB and Lee Beebe Jr. They still have Elijah Surratt at wide receiver. They still have guys. This team didn't just vanish completely. Some of these guys are still here and they want to go to the playoffs again. And Indiana's schedule, once again, Doesn't line up as well as last year's, but it still lines up pretty favorably.
Yeah, it does. But here's the thing, Kate. I don't know if they're as talented, right?
That's true.
Don't get me wrong. Defense still has some really good guys on that. Elijah's Rock could be legit if Mendoza's able to get the ball to him enough. Um, that being said, the schedule is just a bit tougher. I don't think that Illinois game, obviously, as you just heard me, very high on Illinois is a win. I think Illinois comes in there and kind of eats their lunch a bit. Um, I think you're at least at best 9-3. Likely, it wouldn't surprise me if they lose to Iowa. Now, do you slip further than that? I don't think so. I think they're solidly in the 8 to 9 win tier for me, so kind of borderline on good to great still. I think they're this time just on the outside looking in when it comes to the college football playoff picture.
Yeah, and that's, would I like to see Indiana back in? Yes. It would be
It'd be great.
it'd be
Great
great.
storyline.
It would be a great
Yeah.
storyline, but I think they kind of fall into that borderline greater good. I'm going to lean on the fact that I'll be biased and say I think Indiana would be funny to see them go 9-3, so I'll take them for 9-3. I think they win one of Illinois or Iowa, lose to Oregon, lose to Penn State. I think that's pretty fair assessment to say for Indiana. But now we get to Iowa. Starting to make our way almost midway through the Big Ten here. Kirk Ferentz, or Ferentz, however you want to say his last name, the punt man. I think that's easier to say. He said punting and winning was winning, and he was right. Iowa consistently, it feels like, goes 8-5 at worst. I don't know how they keep doing it. They're just a consistently good team. They're never super amazing, except for that one time in 2015. They're never super terrible either, though. Even though their offense might look super terrible, their defense has saved the day how many times? That's not what Iowa's going to look like this year, though. Mark Gronowski is their quarterback. And if you don't know who that is, a two-time FCS champion at South Dakota State. You put Kamari Moulton behind a good offensive line with, by the way, I just want to read this name because it might be the greatest Big Ten name. Ginnings Dunker. That's an O lineman. That's a Big Ten football offensive lineman. Logan Jones is your center. I just had to make sure I read his name right and did not mispronounce that. Ethan Herkett on the defensive end. He'll be fun to see again. I mean, he had a monster season last year. He'll continue to get better. You look at the schedule for Iowa. You start to see the vision that you had already talked about a little bit, Tyler. Albany, you could beat Albany. Iowa State, that's a game that it's going to be tricky in Ames, but it can be done. Iowa's won there before. UMass, Rutgers, Indiana at home, bye week at Wisconsin. There is a world where Iowa is 6-0 or 5-1 with Penn State coming to town. Do you remember the last time that happened when Penn State and Iowa were both undefeated playing in Kinnick? It was a very weird, crazy second half of that game, and Iowa pulled it off. Minnesota would be there next week, then a bye week. Oregon is also at home. Your biggest road game, I mean, what would you say your biggest road game is? It's Iowa State. What would you say your second biggest road game is? Is it Nebraska?
USC.
Okay, you say USC over Nebraska.
West Coast travel, yeah. That's where the West Coast travel could bite you.
Okay.
So, and I say that because you play Oregon the game before.
Okay.
So you're building up, think about this scenario, and you laid it out right. Even if they lose to Penn State, you might be 5-2 going into that Oregon game. Or would that be? Yeah. 2 losses, let's say, going into that Oregon game. So you would still have a shot, right? And you're hosting that one, so you're getting hyped for that one. That the USC game, because of the West Coast travel, that's where I could see a letdown more than the Nebraska game in this scenario. That being said, Cade, and you hit the nail on the head, Gronowski. I mean, this guy is the best quarterback they've had since C.J. Beathard a decade ago. And you know what C.J. did for him? They went 12-0 in the regular season because he was a competent quarterback. Gronowski, 12,000 total yards at South Dakota State. 10,000 of those passing, 93 passing touchdowns, 37 rushing. He only threw 20 picks during his entire 4-year career. So the dude's legit. But can he carry an Iowa team that, quite frankly, at receiver and running back may not be where they've been in previous years? We know their defense is going to be good. but can he lift up that offense? That's what I want to know.
I
If he
mean,
can,
if
that
this
I can see the
was
path to 10-2.
if
I
this
don't
was
think you
like
beat Penn State and Oregon, but I could get them against everybody else.
yeah, if this was like what I used to do when I was a kid and played college football 14, you just spam QB run and you're fine.
Yeah,
You just
yeah,
mix up a halfback dive and a QB run in there, and you find 10 wins somehow. But going to Iowa State, keep in mind, Iowa State, this is supposed to be another big year for them. Iowa State, Indiana, Penn State, Oregon, I think those are games that I think they win one of those. I think that of your big four, quote unquote, I think you can win one of those, especially when three of them are at home. You know the stories. If you're watching this, you know what Iowa is at home. They're a completely different team, especially if they get in the afternoon or evening. And some of those other games, though, you mentioned it, at USC on the road, maybe even Nebraska snipes them on Black Friday. I feel like that balances out what Iowa does. That is the nature of Iowa. That is the nature of the Big Ten West, even though it doesn't technically exist anymore. For every upset win you get, there's an equal but opposite dumb loss that counters out your amazing upset. That's just how they've worked for a long time. And so for Iowa, as much as I'd like to say they could maybe pull off some crazy way to get to 9-3 or something like that, I think they're good. I think that lack of wide receiver help, I think that lack of running back depth that they usually can pull off hinders them a bit more. The defense will be the Iowa defense. It's always going to be good at a minimum, sometimes great and sometimes even elite. Gronowski will do his best, but I think this is an 8-4, perfectly solid Iowa team.
yeah. I've got him at that 7-8 win range. I think that's a good tier for him because, like I said, the range of possibilities essentially is a little too vast, right? A lot's going to have to go their way to get to that 10-win mark. It's possible, but it's more likely they settle into that good team, but not much more.
And that brings us to Nebraska. And Nebraska is another weird conundrum this year. And why do I say weird conundrum? That's a little bit odd to describe Nebraska as a conundrum, but they have been. If you're a Nebraska fan, you know that. It's been forever since you had made a bowl game. And that changed last year. 7-6, and it's the third year of Matt Rule. You know what that means. We saw it happen at Temple. We saw it happen at Baylor. Can it happen on as big of a scale as Nebraska, where they have been pleading, begging, praising the corn god, doing whatever they need to do to get a 10-win season again? They've been trying to find something. They've got a new defensive coordinator in John Butler. They have a new-ish offensive coordinator. Say new-ish because he did coach for him some last year. Dana Holgerson's still there. Dylan Raiola. He's so much of a fan of Pat Mahomes. He wants to be Pat Mahomes, and he gets to play in Kansas City to start the year. He gets to do his best Pat Mahomes impression early. And Nebraska's got some pieces that they have brought in from the portal. Talk about on the defensive side. Linebacker Deshaun McCullough from Oklahoma. Defensive lineman Williams Navardi from Missouri. Offensive side, Neziah Hunter, the wide receiver from Cal. Nebraska's going to have some guys that they have brought in that can help out on both sides of the ball. You look at other defensive good, just strong talent that they have. At the corner, Sierra Wright. On other corner, used more as a nickel. Malcolm Hartzog Jr., again, another classic Big Ten name. I love those types of names. Nebraska has the ability, if they can get on a great start, look at this schedule. How many big games do you see on this schedule that is not Penn State? It's Michigan.
One. Yeah, it's Michigan.
If
they get to host USC, they get to host Iowa, so you don't have to worry about road trips there.
Yeah, but I already talked about with Michigan. I think they're 2-2 coming out of September. Nebraska 4-0. Homecoming against Michigan State. You win that. Maryland, I think, is a win. Minnesota on the road, I think, should be a win. We'll see what Minnesota does on a Friday night. Northwestern, USC is at home at UCLA. There's that West Coast travel. But UCLA has not been the UCLA of, even a few years ago where they might be able to get you. They're still in a bit of a rebuild. They do have Nico Iamaleava, but can one man win you, get you to a bowl game? We're going to see. That's the experiment at UCLA. And then a bye week before you go to Penn State should help out a bit. And Iowa again at home. If Matt Rule is to do this for the third time and get your 10-win season in year 3, boy, does he have the schedule to do it. It is all laid out that this should be the best Nebraska team, at least record-wise, in a long time.
Yeah, it should. I mean, when you look at their schedule and look what they're supposed to be bringing to the table, Cade, I could easily talk myself into a 9-win Nebraska team. That gives them room to struggle a little bit where maybe they shouldn't, right? And still have a great season. Flip side, things don't go right. Maybe they do slip to 7-5 type year where they lose a few more games they shouldn't closely. But that being said, I think ultimately you're looking at about an 8-win Nebraska team that'll give them room to, maybe not be as good in certain spots as you thought they'd be, but still be a good team. But yeah, I mean, you start with that opening schedule. If you get past Michigan, watch out. Watch out.
And that's what I think happens with. I think Nebraska gets past Michigan. I've said this how many years in a row have I said this is the year Nebraska is going to be good, and then it doesn't. I'm so sorry if I just keep jinxing Nebraska indefinitely, but this looks like the year. I know it felt like I said that last year, and they got off to a great start last year before everything went haywire, and they reverted back to what they had been. But if you just get past Michigan, you've said it, I've now said it multiple times, that is the game. That is the game of the first 2/3 of the schedule. I think they find a way to drop another game on the road here or there that they shouldn't. I think they fall to Penn State. You kind of pick the USC, Iowa on the road, maybe somewhere, some Big Ten magic happens and they drop a game they shouldn't. Something along those lines. I think Nebraska finds a way. Matt Rule does it again, and Nebraska is a 9-win team this year. I'm putting them in the great tier.
Wow. A little higher on them than I am.
I think they can do it. I believe in Matt Rule doing it again. He's done it once. He's done it twice. I think he can get it done a third time. Now we go to USC. USC, kind of a weird situation for them in that you talk about the offense. Lincoln Riley, 4th year, has that tremendous buyout. D'Anton Lynn comes in last year and fixes some of the defense. You can't fix a terrible defense overnight, but I believe I saw it in the Bill Connolly preview I read at one earlier on in the offseason that they went from 108th on the defensive side in strength and power rankings to 54th. I mean, you just slash it in half in one season in what they were able to fix defensively. You still have Jaden Maiava. You bring in a great running back in Eli Sanders from New Mexico. Mekhi Lemon's still there as a good receiver. You get some pieces transferred in on the defensive side. DJ Harvey, corner from San Jose State. Bishop Fitzgerald, the safety from NC State. And you look at USC's schedule and you start to think, well, if they've got some pieces in, look at those first 4 games. Missouri State, Georgia Southern, at Purdue, Michigan State. They can start to get on a roll. And then you look at the next 3 games and you start to maybe think otherwise. At Illinois, bye week, Michigan, and at Notre Dame. It's a tough 4 weeks. Yeah, that bye week helps, but that's a bit tough.
Yeah, it's a rough stretch, right? And I think when you look at this team, there's going to be certain teams, Cade, and it happens every year, where you say, man, it felt like this team was a lot better than that record indicated. Or, man, this team felt like they really were improved compared to last year, but the record wasn't much different, right? And I think, unfortunately for USC, this may lay out to be one of those years. You mentioned that 4-game stretch at Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska. Don't forget you got Iowa and Oregon back-to-back as well after that. So there's 6 games where you might not be favored. Or at the very least, a toss-up in a couple of them, right? So that's a tough stretch, and that leaves a wide range of possibilities.
It
You can
does.
maybe talk yourself into saying, hey, if this defense is continuing an upward trend and the offense comes to be what Lincoln Riley can produce, then maybe there's something there. Maybe they pull off some upsets and you could push for a 9-3 season. But really, unfortunately, I feel like this is probably still an 8-4, 7-5 USC team where, hey, they show improvement compared to last year again, but it's just not enough.
And that's ultimately the category I think they fall in. I would like to think of those big 6 you mentioned, you get at least 1 or 2. But then again, that still does not move the needle. That's not what a USC football team, they should not be just in the good tier. They should be competing for something higher. Now, I'm not saying they're going to fire Lincoln Riley or anything like that. His buyout is so high, and you see the recruiting class he's trying to build in the horizon. They're not going to do that, and I think that's fine. That's USC has that decision to make. I think it's pretty easy when you keep them. You see what that recruiting class looks like next year. You might start to see that conversation come up just a little bit down the road should something happen to that recruiting class. Now, again, is that maybe me wish casting? I don't know, but we'll see, Tyler. We'll see. But now we got to talk about Washington before I turn this into a entirely different video. Jed Fish, in his second year, brings in Ryan Walters as defensive coordinator, who you might recall was the head coach at Purdue last year. So you just flip him in, keep him in conference. Washington 6-7 last year, 4-5 in the Big Ten. Had some highs, had some lows. I think that's pretty safe to say. But Washington's a team that has potential. They have potential if you rely on DeMond Williams Jr., who had one of the higher QBRs in the Big Ten. If you believe in QBR, he was number 4, which makes him the highest returning QBR of anybody in the Big Ten. You look at the first 3 games, you could see Washington starting 3-0. Colorado State, UC Davis, you got to go to Pullman for the Apple Cup, but you have a bye before that. The problem is you look at some of those bigger games down the line. Ohio State, it is at home, but it's Ohio State. You got to go to Michigan. You get Illinois right after that, and you've got Oregon to end the year. I think those are the pretty clear 4 going against Washington. But if you can find a way to win one of those and not stumble somewhere else, not stumble against a Rutgers or maybe late in the year, Wisconsin, you think about that long trip. We talked about it so many times going to the West Coast. You think about it from the opposite perspective, from the West Coast going all the way into the Midwest. You don't want to get tripped up in one of those, because if you're not, Washington has that ability to be that kind of borderline 8 to 9 wins. I think that's kind of where their peak is, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And DeMond Williams, I think, there's a couple really intriguing quarterbacks in this conference. He's definitely on the list for me, because when you look at what he did in that bowl game against Louisville last year, holy smokes, there's a lot of good to like.
Yeah.
And the fact they're going to have Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston at running back and wide receiver. Boston and Coleman could both be among the best at their positions in the conference. The O-line should be improved. So there's a lot to like for this offense. The defense is going to have some questions go, and then you get to that schedule and you laid it out well. There could be an easy 4 losses with Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, and Oregon. Even if you're competitive in those games, very easily lose those. And then there's a couple of potential pitfalls. That Wisconsin game is definitely one you circle. So as much as you like what Washington is bringing to the table, maybe a step forward, right? Probably still, though, ultimately 7-8 win team at their best.
Yeah, I think the potential is maybe you snag one of those and you get 9-3. I feel like that's absolute best case scenario for Washington this year. I do want to mention on the Apple Cup again, because I always find this fascinating. I will tell you the story before you hear it on CBS themselves. Talking about linebacker Tariq Al-Ukra, who was at Washington State last year. Now he transfers to Washington. See how he plays in the return to Pullman. That's all I'm going to say about that. You will hear that on the broadcast. He's supposed to be a great player for him, too. He is. So. He's supposed to be one of the main guys on the defense. But Washington, you get to go in good tier. I think that's pretty fair for UW this year. Now we got to go to Minnesota. Can Minnesota continue to row the boat under PJ Fleck? 9 years now with PJ Fleck in Minnesota. 8-5 last year. Drake Lindsay, the quarterback. Is that a name you've heard before? If you're a Minnesota fan, yes. Everyone else, no. Because he's only thrown 5 passes. He's a redshirt freshman coming in. You bring in A.J. Turner, running back from Marshall. You still have Darius Taylor from last year. You bring in Malachi Coleman at receiver from Nebraska. Start to think about, okay, Minnesota, they might have a little bit of an offense this year. And not to add, they've got a pretty fun safety as well in Coy Parrish, who they've talked about at times, maybe moving him to receiver, maybe having him do the Travis Hunter route of seeing if he could play offense and defense. I don't know if that'll come to fruition or not, but it's a pretty good-looking September if you're Minnesota. If you can survive one specific game on the road and that long trip out to Berkeley, which, keep in mind, think of how much we talked about already other Cal transfers in some of these other videos. Cal will be an interesting discussion in the ACC video. Buffalo, Northwestern State, if you could beat Cal and Rutgers at home, you're 4-0 with Ohio State on the road. You feel pretty good about, okay, not that you're going to beat Ohio State, but this has the potential to be another solid Minnesota squad put together. Purdue after that, you're looking at 5-1, I think, with Nebraska coming to town on a Friday night. If you can split one of Nebraska and Iowa there, a 9-3 season is possible for Minnesota. I really think that is where the Golden Gophers could get to this year, if everything goes together. It's Minnesota, however. Drake Lindsey may not turn out well. Something might go wrong. The defense may not be as good as expected. And you lose to Nebraska, you lose to Iowa, you lose Oregon, you lose Ohio State. Maybe you drop to Cal as well in some other game you don't expect, and you're looking at 6-6. That is the duality of Minnesota. Much like I talked about with Iowa, there's always some weird Big Ten West team that could do just about anything, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately for Minnesota, there's going to be a little bit too much pressure on Drake Lindsey because when you look at this team, you got some pieces right on both sides of the ball that you like, but is there any true star power there? And then factor in the experience at quarterback and a little bit on that offensive line. Maybe their left tackle spot isn't somebody that's going to be highly experienced. Then you get into the schedule. Got those road games, right? Against Ohio State, Iowa, Oregon. That's not pretty. Nebraska's not a gimme. You could argue Michigan State might not be a gimme. So I think ultimately for Minnesota, is there a path to maybe 8 wins? Absolutely. I mean, you could surprise some people, but I think it's more likely you see about a 7-5 effort because it would not surprise me if on top of those big three, they find a way to lose a couple of those games in conference where you go, man, a couple more plays, they would have had that, or a couple different plays, they would have had that.
Yeah, and that is, as much as I'd like to see Minnesota make another big run at it, because I think they are, when they get going, that is a really fun place to see. I think good tier is perfectly fine for Minnesota, somewhere between 7 and 8. And it is weird to think, Tyler, that they are 11th in the Big Ten
Yeah.
preseason poll, and we
I mean,
still
this is
do
going to
not
be a
have
conference.
we still do not have anyone below good. Everyone we expect to be good still at this point, and we're about to get to Wisconsin, so that might change now because Wisconsin went 5-7 last year. Luke Fickell, year number 3, trying to get something going. New offensive coordinator in Jeff Grimes, kind of known for more of that wide zone, running the ball a bit more. Maybe Wisconsin's trying to get back to the roots of being Wisconsin. That's what they do. They run the ball for a living. But Billy Edwards Jr. comes over from Maryland at quarterback. You still have Darion Dupree at running back, Vinny Anthony the second at wide receiver. But Tyler, we've got to talk about someone who might be a bit special. Bill Connolly pointed this out, and this is Bill Connolly and I sometimes are on the same wavelength, and I think you're on it as well. As let me find the most random story. Let me find the most random sicko tier moment that might get brought up at some point this year. And Wisconsin might have everybody beat. And that's because of safety Matt Young, or Young, however you want to call him. Tyler, this is a transfer from a safety, keep in mind, from a Division III school, Bethel College in Minnesota, who had 10 tackles for loss, 10 and a half. Let me give him his other half. 20 passes defended, also caught a 69-yard touchdown pass, had an 82-yard kickoff return, scored 5 defensive touchdowns, and he's 6'3". Okay,
yeah.
how is he there? What happened? How is this kid playing D3 football, Tyler?
Right.
Please explain to me how that happened.
I'm telling you right now, Kate, as a guy who experienced the NAI level of college football, all it takes is a guy that didn't take his studies very seriously, either coming out of high school or maybe while he's getting a big opportunity at a D1 school. And it's very easy to find those guys kind of dispersed through the D2, D3 NAI ranks. I saw some kids come and go against either teams Langston played or Langston had on our team that you looked at them from a physical standpoint and said, how in the world are you here? But it happens. And some of those guys either, use that opportunity to kind of recollect themselves and get serious. Some of them don't. So It's easier than you think, but it is still fun to think, man, how can an athlete like this be at that type of level? Not to say those are bad levels, but you look at them and say, yeah, you should be at a better level.
But Wisconsin's schedule. I mean, we talked about the
Oof.
fun side of
Well,
this. Now let's get into the brutal part and why
oh,
this might be my. I don't even know if this is that hot of a take. The more I've thought about it, you look at Wisconsin's schedule, and I mean, you look at the brutality of this thing. You go to Alabama early in the season. You've got to go to Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon back to back, and Iowa before that, sandwiched in between Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon. That's your homecoming. That could be a 4 loss. They could have an 0-4 October. It would not
yeah.
stun me at all to see Wisconsin at best 3-5 going into November. And Indiana's not going to be easy. Illinois at home is not going to be easy. Even going to Minnesota that late in the season, if they're beat up, if they're discouraged, this could be a bad Wisconsin team. And you can flip Minnesota with Washington, by the way, as well. That wouldn't shock me either. This is a Wisconsin team that, even if they do have some talent, I don't know how good they're going to be, how good their schedule will allow them to be. They might be a team that starts 3-1 if they could beat Maryland at home, and we'll get to Maryland in a bit. But I just don't see any joy for Wisconsin outside of the month of September. I just really don't.
Yeah, I think the problem for Wisconsin is twofold. The schedule is just god awful, as you laid out. I mean, that is brutal. That is horrible. Um, on top of that, I think you are in a spot where they're going to be transitioning a little bit on offense. You mentioned the coordinator change and maybe trying to get back to what Wisconsin's known for. At quarterback, Billy Edwards was really inconsistent for Maryland last season. So does he improve or is he more of the same, right? And against those opponents, you don't want inconsistency. So they find themselves in that weird spot where I really don't think this offense is going to be where it needs to be for them to be competitive in a lot of these games. And that's unfortunate to say because I do think their defense is good, but I think their O line's a little bit behind what it usually um, is for Wisconsin. Usually you could count on at least a few really good O linemen. I don't think they're quite there. And then all the other questions at the skill positions for them is what gets me. So ultimately, Wisconsin in a different reality maybe could be a 6-7 win team with a better schedule, but I could easily see another 5-7 year or worse, depending on how things go.
And that's where my take comes in. I don't think this is even an average. I think this is a 4-8 Wisconsin team.
I say 4-5 is probably your best.
Yeah, I dare I say if Maryland grows a spine for one game, this could be a 3-9 Wisconsin
Mm,
team.
mm.
It is that bad, and this is what happens when you go against running the ball down the middle, Tyler. They had a formula that was about give the ball
Oh,
to your NFL style running back, and then you said, "No, let's throw the ball." Why do something else when that one specific formula has worked your entire life? Why go away from it, Tyler? That is the question I
good
ask
question.
Wisconsin. And I don't know
Good question.
how long with this brutal of a schedule Luke Fickle will last. I really don't. And I don't even know how much of this will be his fault. They got handed one of the worst schedules you could ever imagine. It's bad. It's bad for Wisconsin. I can
Yeah.
tell you that much.
it-
But we've got to get to Rutgers. Rutgers, Greg Schiano, 17th year, 6th year in his second stint with the Scarlet Knights. Rutgers went 7-6 last year. They have the potential to be okay again. I'm not going to say they're going to be a world beater. We had the joke last year of, Rutgers' schedule was so favorable that in theory they could have been 5-6-0 by the time they played. I think it was Ohio State or maybe someone even Penn State or one of the bigger teams in the Big Ten. It was one of those. And there's still some pieces there. They added a nice wide receiver transfer, DT Sheffield from North Texas. They have some good guys on defense, both defensive linemen, Eric O'Neill from James Madison, Bradley Weaver from Ohio. They've got the pieces to do it. It's just how much do you trust Athen Kaliakmanis at quarterback, and how much do you trust the schedule for Rutgers? Because you look at Rutgers' schedule, and you look at that first 5 games, and you think, okay, it's not that bad, really. Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Norfolk State. You get Iowa at home. Maybe if you could just split one of Iowa and going to Minnesota, things could be all right. And then Washington on a Friday night on the road after a bye week. And then Oregon. And then you get maybe a break with Purdue, but Illinois is lurking right around the corner. And then if you think that's somehow still okay, you just need to look at those last two games. That's torture. Ohio State and Penn State back to back. It's not fun for anybody.
No. And I think what's interesting about this Rutgers team is you could legitimately had that scenario where somehow, some way, they creep into that Oregon game still undefeated, only for
It
them to
could.
fall to that back half of the schedule, and you go, "What the heck happened to Rutgers?" Well, what happened was they were a good team, but not really good enough to hang with the big boys, right? I think best case scenario, maybe they find their way to 8-4. Unfortunately, this is another case of a team that might show some good improvement compared to last year's squad, but still ultimately wind up around the same record. I think 6 wins, 7 wins is probably the most likely scenario. You reach a bowl game, you maybe show some good things, but just that schedule is doing you in a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Rutgers. This is one of those. This has 6-6 written all over it to me. This is an average Rutgers team. They're not going to wow you a whole lot, but they're not going to really do anything where you go, "That's a bad football team." They're just perfectly down the middle. Michigan State is next, and they're kind of that. I don't want to say the same situation as Rutgers. Jonathan Smith, second year, 5-7 last year, 3-6 in the Big Ten. Aiden Childs still quarterback for them, trying to develop a little bit more. Looked good at times in the first half of the season last year. Fell off in the back half. You get Nick Marsh, a wide receiver, tight end Jack Velling, a running back transfer from Sacramento State. Last time someone got a running back transfer from Sacramento State, they were pretty good, Tyler. I don't know if Elijah Tolliver could be the same as Cam Scadaboo, but he's got a sick name. He's got a pretty good name. May not be Scadaboo, but you add Omari Kelly, wide receiver from Middle Tennessee. It is. Linebacker David Santiago returns. Michigan State, you start talking about those pieces and maybe they can put something together. You look at the schedule, you go, okay, Western Michigan, Boston College is at home, Youngstown State. Maybe something can be done about this. And then you go to USC, bye week, and then here comes Nebraska, Indiana, Michigan, and you start to immediately sink back into that. And then, by the way, Penn State and Iowa are waiting for you back to back in mid to late November before giving up a home game to play Maryland at a neutral site at Ford Field. Why? I don't know, but Michigan State chose to do that. I don't understand why they do the neutral site game when you could just play it at home, but that's me. That's not a critique of this team. That's just a critique I have of where college athletics is right now.
Sure.
But Michigan State, this is one of those. I don't really know where to put. I know they're not going to be in the. I know where they can be. It's just, are they going to get there? How well is Childs going to develop in year two? Jonathan Smith. It took him a while to Oregon State to get Oregon State into that kind of 8-9 wins in the Pac-12, make them look like more and more of a threat. It's going to take a while here at Michigan State. If he gets that long enough leash, which I think he should, Michigan State, best case scenario, they start 3-0 out of the gate. 2-1 could happen as well. Would not surprise me. And man, that schedule just gets a bit more brutal as it goes along. And you start to think, can this team just get to a bowl game?
CK, that's where I'm at with them. I think they profile very similar to Washington, right? Where you look at their offense and say, hey, there's some exciting pieces there. Problem is, their defense maybe is a bit more solid than Washington in my mind, but the problem is there they don't maybe have the big time playmakers, some of that high end talent that you would need to pull off some bigger wins, right? And then the schedule factoring in, uh, this is a team that wants to push for a bowl game, but that's probably it. I'd say 6 wins, maybe 7 if you're lucky.
Yeah, it's brutal. I think brutal is just a good way to describe Michigan State. I think they're in the same tier with Rutgers. They are an average team. 6-6, 5-7, somewhere around that again is where I see Michigan State at. And then keep in mind, Michigan State was in the tie there with Rutgers for 13th. They had a tie for 13th in the preseason poll. And what a surprise, they're both in the average tier here on this list. Now we get to UCLA. We are officially in to the bottom four. This is where things get scary, I think, Tyler. These are four teams that were not in good situations last year. Are they in a slightly better situation this? I wouldn't even say are they in a great situation or even good. It's just are they in somewhat of a better situation than they were last year? Second year for Deshaun Foster for UCLA, 5-7 last year. Some interesting transfers. Javian Thomas at running back for Cal, now at UCLA, and of course the big one, Nico Iamaleava for coming over from Tennessee. What a weird situation that was. We had a video about that. But UCLA, will one quarterback change the trajectory of the program? Even just a little bit. Week 1 and 2 will determine a lot. Utah at home and then at UNLV. You're going to learn
Not
a
easy
lot.
games, I might add.
Yeah, you're going to learn a lot pretty quick.
Yeah, and the schedule doesn't get any easier. Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State, Nebraska, all on that. Washington, USC to end the season, split there between road and home, but you know your West Coast team, so you're fine there. That being said, I mean it's all on Nico, right? I wouldn't say this UCLA team is as talent depleted as maybe some of these other squads we talked about. I think on paper they're maybe better than Rutgers. The problem is their schedule's not really that good. That
Yeah.
schedule in the non-con is tough. Utah is no pushover. UNLV is projected to be one of the better group of 5 teams. You're on the road there. They're going to be looking at that as an opportunity to kind of get one over the power conference teams, right? And then Penn State, you're likely not able to win that one. I mean, you're hosting, maybe pull off some weirdness, but talent gap there is huge. At Indiana, Ohio State, I think you can forget about those. I mean, there's not really very many easy games on the schedule. That's the problem for UCLA. Unless Nico just takes a huge step forward, I don't see this UCLA team doing much. Um, there is maybe improvement compared to last year's team, but there's too many new faces. The schedule's not good. I'm putting this team probably solidly in the bad tier.
Yeah, it's one of those weird decisions where most of these teams we've talked about their non-con schedule where it's not much of a problem. UCLA is one of those teams that needs that in their favor to be a bowl eligible team, and they don't have it. There's so many other teams I would have liked to have seen playing a Utah or a UNLV, but UCLA got both of them. And that is going to be the reason why they are a 4-8 team, I feel like, at the absolute best. Send UCLA into the bad tier. This is not going to be very fun for the Bruins. It's not. I don't know how much Nico can help them. We talked about it even in that video. I don't know how much Nico truly helped Tennessee last year, and that team still made the playoffs with their defense and run game. And now we still have 3 other teams to get to, and we're getting into the bad tier now. Maryland coming up, year 7 for Mike Locksley, 4-8 last year, 1 conference win is what Maryland had. And this might be, I don't know if you can call this a sign on me or a sign on anything else. When you think of Maryland, there are not a whole lot of pieces to talk about. We've got some incoming freshmen. Malik Washington, true freshman, expected to be the starter for the Terps this year. And their schedule at the beginning doesn't look too terrible in terms of, we just talked about with UCLA. I think they'd much rather be playing Florida Atlantic, Towson, and Northern Illinois. I think that's pretty self-evident. But then you go to Wisconsin, talked about that a little bit. I think that's a loss for Maryland. If they can somehow get to 3-0, if they can beat Northern Illinois and Florida Atlantic, and then Washington, Nebraska, you go to UCLA, and then you look at that November, they might win 1 game in November if they're lucky because Rutgers is a road game. That's just where, and I don't even know if that would even make much of a difference because I think Rutgers is on a different talent level than Maryland. If that game was at Maryland, maybe it's somewhat competitive, but on the road in Piscataway, it's not happening.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with this Maryland team. You start 3-0, but after that, I don't know if they'll be favored in any game. At best, they'll be
I don't think they
picking
will.
in some of those games. So it comes down to one of those deals of can you find a way to somehow sneak 2 conference games? Is it possible? Maybe, but not very likely. This is definitely a bad tier team for me.
It might be like last year. They might be able to sneak one, and that's
Yeah.
about it. Maryland getting tossed into the bad tier, and there's still two more teams to get to. That's the as I have to adjust the paper one more time. There's still we are firmly into the depths of the bad tier, and now here comes Northwestern. David Brown in his third year. Northwestern went 4-8 last year, two Big Ten wins, and they've got Preston Stone from SMU as their quarterback. Last year, that would have been a major what happened to SMU that Preston Stone had to leave. Something must have gone horribly wrong for SMU, but that didn't happen. Preston Stone is
No.
here because he had by his standards, horrible start to the season. We expected a lot more out of him, and it didn't happen. Now he's here at Northwestern, pairing up with Griffin Wild, a wide receiver, again from South Dakota State. Another time we mentioned the Jackrabbits here. And they've got some good defensive guys. Aiden Hubbard on the defensive end. They've got a good linebacker in Mike Olheim. They've got an opportunity to be an okay team when you look at some of that talent that they have. But then you look at the non-con and they start at Tulane and you immediately throw that out the window.
Yeah, but I think the key here with Northwestern of these bad tier teams that we're talking about, right? They have the most talent. They've got a quarterback that is hungry to prove, hey, because you remember Preston Stone coming into the season, by all indications, was supposed to be big time for SMU. And SMU had a big time season, but like I said, it's because they had to move on from Preston Stone. So uh, you look at the schedule, there's 3 guaranteed wins, I think. Western Illinois, Louisiana Monroe, and Purdue. All home games, all winnable. You should win those. Then it becomes a question of, can you beat UCLA? Can you outduel them in your place? Um, can you beat Minnesota? Maybe. I think of these bad tier teams, Nebraska, or not Nebraska, excuse me, Northwestern has the best possibility to maybe achieve 5 wins, maybe creep into bowl contention. I don't know if they'll get there. I'm still probably in the bad tier with them, but put me on the borderline with them. I see better scenarios for them to maybe get out of that bad tier.
I agree with your theory, but I just don't see it's possible. I think Northwestern is trapped in the bad tier. I don't even think they can creep into average. I think they are kind of permanently at 4-8. They're stuck against a wall until they either improve enough talent wise or somebody falls down to that pit with them. And that brings us to Purdue. One last team. Purdue went 1-11 last year, fired Ryan Walters, and brings in Barry Odom from UNLV. What does Purdue have talent wise, Tyler? Because this is a conversation we had about what do we even talk about that they have. They've got Devin Mockabee, who could be an intriguing running back for them. They have Manny Powell at linebacker. We don't even know who Purdue's quarterback is going to be. The last time I saw there's 4 different guys in contention for the job. And Barry Odom said, yeah, we need to make a decision soon, but I don't know how soon. And Odom's a good talent evaluator. He's a good program riser. You saw what he did at UNLV. It's not like he can't get Purdue back to somewhat respectable. It's not like Purdue is going to be in this endless void of terrible forever. But my goodness, last year we talked about, what does Purdue have? And it felt like it's going to take a lot. They could beat Ball State and Southern Illinois to start the year. But do you see another win on that schedule after September 6th? Because the more I
Not
look
one
at
that's
it,
guaranteed,
yeah,
that's for sure.
I don't see a game that they're favored in.
No, not at all.
I don't see a game where they're, I don't even know if there's a game that they're within 3 points of on the favoring.
Yeah. I mean, it's combination of super tough schedule like USC, Notre Dame back to back, and then Illinois. That's tough. Road games against Minnesota, Northwestern that aren't a given. Rutgers at home. I mean, if you can get up for it, maybe. But then after that, you got at Michigan, Ohio State. Got to make a trip to Washington, and you end with Indiana at home. Oh man. And then on top of that, the talent's just not there. There's going to be a couple guys, like I said, that could be interesting for them as far as producers. There's just not hardly anything around it. This is a year where as I call this with a lot of coaches, right? That year one, especially when you take over a bad program, you're flushing things out. You're setting your culture. You're figuring out who actually has the gumption to want to be good. And that's what this year is going to be for Barry Odom because it's not going to be an easy season. So you're going to have to be tough if you want to play through it and be productive. And unfortunately for Purdue, that means hardly any wins. I mean, very easily could be right back in to that pain tier, Cade.
I think that's where they are. I would like to see, maybe Purdue can rally the troops together, play one game where they can overcome a Rutgers for homecoming, or maybe go on the road and beat a Northwestern, or go do something. But I just don't think they can. I don't think they have the talent or maybe the willpower, even by that point in the season when you've had loss after loss after loss, to do anything. I think Purdue is stuck in pain tier yet again, and that is what our Big Ten tier list looks like. It feels a little odd looking having your big stack at the top, then a very thin average tier, and then some bad, and then Purdue is just all by themselves. But like we kind of talked about, some of these tier lists are going to differentiate. They're going to look completely wonky compared to other conferences. I think the Big Ten's a perfect example of that. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of great, and there's a lot of elite. But there's just not a whole lot of bad. But when you do see that bad, you can recognize it pretty quick, and it's not going to be pretty.
Nope.
But that is the projection for the Big Ten. I can't wait to look back at this in December and somehow somebody has pulled an Indiana from last year and is really good. And we go, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we?
Purdue bowl game? Question mark?
No. We go, well, of course. Well, yeah, we should have known that,
should have known.
We should have known that USC was going to turn it around offensively and go 10-2. We should have known that. There's always one team you're going to look at, and I'm excited to see what team that is going to be. But folks, as always, if you made it through this entire video, we do appreciate it a lot that you stuck around. If you like the video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments down below, tell us what you agree with, disagree with, or just talk about whatever, honestly. I do not care. Talk about, what your favorite place in the Big Ten is. Just, say what team you root for. I really do not care, honestly. Talk about whatever, talk amongst yourselves, whatever you want to do. It's a free country. If you're listening on Spotify, of course, we appreciate that as well. It's almost college football season. Just 2 more weeks. That's what I keep telling myself. Just 2 more weeks, and we can actually watch some football. It's almost here. Folks, as always, until next time, have a good one, everybody.